うどんとそばは
はい。
中国から来たんですよ。
そうなんですね。ありがとうございます。
まあそうですよ。大体大陸から伝わってきてますよね、日本料理って。
びっくりで僕も知らなかったからどうですかその事実を聞いて。
いやー、ありがたいですね。
One of my favorite dish is khao jam, a Kelantanese Thai rice dish that gets its green hue from the juice of a dozen different types of green leaves. Growing up, the level of complexity of this dish has always baffled me. How did someone come up with the idea to mix the juice of so many different leaves into the rice, then mix half a dozen more types of raw vegetables and leaves, crushed fish flakes, toasted coconut shavings, and topped off with pungent, unfiltered, fermented fish sauce? We call this budu. All ingredients that you wouldn't expect a child to appreciate, yet resulting in a dish that is fragrant, salty, rich in umami, with layers of textures, and most importantly, a meaty taste with mellow vegetable undertones. It wasn't until much later in life that I realized that culinary art, like technology or human knowledge, comes not from vacuum, but from building on top of layers and layers of existing knowledge. To quote the now famous phrase by Kamala Harris, "You think you just fell out of a coconut tree?" Similarly, dishes don't just pop into existence by a singular chef sitting in his kitchen designing the ensemble. One example is sushi, the modern version with vinegared rice. Despite its simplicity, hints at the layers of influence that this dish has from the past. This dish started as a technology in utilizing the fermentation of rice into vinegar, giving the fish a longer shelf life. The origins of this technology started in mainland Southeast Asia or southern China, probably by Austronesian speakers who are themselves one of the two progenitors of rice cultivation. And living along the lower reaches of Yangtze, Pearl, and Mekong means that they have an abundant access to freshwater fish and a need to preserve this fish. And the best way to do it is with their staple, rice. This consumption of raw fish would later spread to the Japanese and also to the Chinese, as they live in close contact with the Austronesian speakers, who still lived at the edges of the Chinese world by the time of the spring and autumn period. This is recorded by writers such as Confucius and Mencius, who stated that the eating of raw fish is a practice known as kwai. In Japan, this practice of eating raw fish fermented with rice evolved into nare sushi, which then evolved into our modern version of sushi today. For the Chinese, however, the eating of kwai becomes less and less common as the eating of raw meat falls out of fashion in post-Song Dynasty China. However, among the ethnically Chinese area, one place, close to the homeland of the Austronesian speakers, retains this ancient borrowed practice of eating raw fish with vinegar, ginger, and plum. This place is called Shunde in Guangzhou. But even then, it is only eaten during Chinese New Year, in line with the decline of the consumption of raw fish or raw meat in Chinese culture. Now, for the Malaysians watching this and can't contain your excitement to mention YeeSang or YeeSang, let me remind you that the practice of eating raw fish goes back at least 2,500 years in southern China, and eating it with some of the modern ingredients like ginger and plum sauce was already recorded as early as 1,500 years ago in the Qi Min Yao Shu. So no, YeeSang didn't drop from a coconut tree somewhere in Seremban. The practice is thousands of years old, perhaps even as old as the cultivation of rice itself. But the modern presentation and the act of tossing it with chopstick is perhaps Malaysian in origin. And that is the lesson of this video. The modern dishes that we get are often much older and requiring a myriad of ingredients, technologies, and material from multiple places and multiple cultures to assemble into its current form today. To claim the origins of a dish without appreciating the meandering passage of history that gave rise to its modern form is rather ignorant. Remember the reaction of the two Japanese in the beginning of this video when they were told that udon and soba were both introduced to Japan from China? How did they react? Instead of fighting about it like Malaysians and Indonesians over nasi goreng or Singaporeans and Malaysians over bak kut teh, they were thankful to have learned something they didn't know then. They did not behave defensively because they are confident of their own culture. Just like sushi, soba and udon don't become less Japanese just because they originated from somewhere else, because the depth of the Japanese culture is not defined by one or two food items. Such is the civilizing effect of having pride in one's culture, something we should all learn from.